Welcome to today's episode of Buildings Hub Live, where we spotlight the changemakers and technologies leading the charge to electrify our built environment. On our podcast, we tackle the issues facing building decarbonization, from space heating to water heaters to electric cooking and beyond. On this episode, we'll sit down with 3 experts to discuss the importance of workforce development and contractor training for building decarbonization. Joining us today are John Doherty, Senior Advisor to the General President at the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, Mary MacPherson, Program Manager at the U.S. Department of Energy, and Harley Stokes, Policy Advisor at BlueGreen Alliance. What role is labor to play in the movement to decarbonize our building stock? Stay with us to learn more. Here's your host, Atlas Public Policy Analyst, Zach Strauss.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 10th episode of Buildings Hub Live. My name is Zach Strauss, Policy Analyst at Atlas Public Policy, and I have the pleasure of being your host today. For today's episode, we'll dive in to discuss the important role of workforce development and contractor training in building decarbonization. Developing a skilled, qualified workforce is essential to decarbonizing the U.S. building stock. Contractors serve as the key points of contact with potential adopters as they decide what to install. They also provide important information on available technologies, incentives, benefits, and costs to these customers. But do we currently have the workforce necessary to achieve our building decarbonization goals? And if not, what programs and initiatives exist to alter that story? Stay with us today to learn more. But before we jump into our conversation, a quick note on Buildings Hub. Here at Atlas, we manage a one-stop shop data analysis tool for building sector decarbonization called Buildings Hub. If you're interested in heat pump market data, state policies, funding programs, the current makeup of the U.S. housing stock, federal grants, we've got you covered and a lot more. Register for our portal and check it out today. We'd love to have you join the Buildings Hub community. We even put a link here below. Take a look. I think it's pretty cool. Now, for today's episode, we are currently live on YouTube and LinkedIn, and we encourage our audience to send us over your questions, and we'll put them in as we go along. You can do so through the Q&A portal through our YouTube channel. We really look forward to hearing from you throughout our episode today. It is now my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce our superstar speakers. We are joined today by John Doherty, Senior Advisor to the General President of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, Mary MacPherson, Program Manager at the U.S. Department of Energy, and last but not least, Harley Stokes, Policy Advisor at the BlueGreen Alliance. Welcome to all of you, and thank you very much for being here with us today on Buildings Hub Live.
Hi, folks. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Zach.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. We have lots to cover today, only about half an hour, so we're going to jump right into our conversation. So this is our scene setter question. I'm going to start with Harley. So from a high-level perspective, how are you involved in workforce development and contractor training, particularly as it pertains to building decarbonization? What role are you playing in this space?
Sure. So I'll start by introducing myself. I'm a federal policy advisor with BlueGreen Alliance. And for those who don't know, BlueGreen Alliance is a pretty unique coalition of labor unions and environmental organizations. And our basic premise is that you don't have to choose between a clean environment and good jobs. You can and must have both. And we follow this better buildings approach, which I'm happy to dig into. But as far as our role in this space, 2 years ago, it was about advocating for federal funding for buildings to upgrade and green them. And now that we have that funding, our role is to make sure that implementation is tied to creating really good jobs, that it's equitable and going into, systematically marginalized communities, and that we're getting all those other amazing benefits that can come with buildings, including health, climate resilience, energy savings, et cetera.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Looking forward to hearing more about your work at the BlueGreen Alliance and that intersection of labor and environmental and decarbonization outcomes. I'd like to go over now to Mary.
Hi, folks. I am with DOE's Office of State and Community Energy Programs on the Workforce Training Team. So the Office of State and Community Energy Programs, also known as SCEP, was created about a year ago to deploy billions authorized through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, or BILL and IRA. My team works on about $300 million in Bill and IRA programs that will prepare our workforce to deliver these billions in clean energy upgrades to homes and businesses and institutions. So our team within SCEP is now working to draft these funding announcements, and we've issued a couple already, and soon we'll be issuing grants to states and institutions of higher education, industry, and labor groups.
Excellent. I know this is an exciting time for SCEP and for the IRA programs writ large. We're really excited to dive into your specific cornerstone program later in our conversation today. So let's put a pin in that. And last but not least, over to John.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Doherty. I'm the Senior Advisor to the General President here at the International Unions of Painters and Allied Trades. Just to give you a little insight on what we do, obviously we represent painters, that's in the name, but we also represent glazers who do a lot of building decarbonization work on building envelopes. They're the ones that install the dynamic glass, the photovoltaic panels, and things that you see buildings starting to move toward. With that, we also, aside from the policy that the two aforementioned, we also have to translate on a local level. So that means getting into our affiliates in every state throughout the United States to make sure that they understand what funding opportunities are available, what communities we should be recruiting from, and putting together, a more comprehensive plan to catalyze the workforce that's going to be needed from this market transformation. So it's a lot of legwork on the federal level, and then building out these state tables so that more voices are in the mix and people on the local level understand how these new advancements in electrification are going to happen.
Excellent. Looking forward to hearing more from you, especially someone who represents the labor force we're talking about. Want to get your perspective on sort of what the vibe and feeling is in the labor force community. So moving on to our next question. So I'll start with Harley. So your perspective at the BlueGreen Alliance, why is workforce development so crucial to achieving our building decarb goals? And what is needed in your perspective right now to shore up gaps in our qualified labor force to meet our climate challenge?
So I think the bottom line is what we need are local, state, and federal policies that are supportive of workforce development and can sort of complement this federal funding that Mary talked about, the Bill and IRA funding that can be used towards buildings, right? So what does that look like? First, you have to think about you're not going to be able to attract and retain the workforce that you need to build these projects unless you're offering really good quality jobs that lead to stable careers. So that's one top line. The other top line is you're not going to get the expected energy savings or health benefits without this skilled workforce. And we know that because studies have shown, if you install improperly, you lose those benefits, right? Mm-hmm. And then the other thing I wanted to flag is that BlueGreen Alliance just came out with commissioned a report with the Political Economy Research Institute. And basically what the report said was, there's so much job potential, essentially 3 million, let's say in the construction industry alone over 6-7 years, every year, 3 million jobs. But we need to be really focused on underrepresented workers. And right now that's women and that's Black workers. So I'm happy to dive more into that, but I just wanted to share those sort of top lines around thinking about this.
Thank you very much. That point about improper installation as depriving us of those benefits, making sure we have the qualified workforce that's able to install things properly and with the right certification, that's really critical. And we'll get into equity as well, thinking about how we're going to recruit and retain that underserved or underrepresented community in our workforce here. Mary or John, anything to add? Over to Mary.
Sure. Yeah, building off of what Harley said, we know that the energy efficiency workforce in particular is not very diverse. And so workforce development programs give us an opportunity to bring folks into that industry who haven't historically had access to those opportunities. We also know that employers in energy efficiency face extreme difficulty hiring folks. And so there is also a need to just size up the energy efficiency workforce in addition to diversifying it and bringing folks into this industry who are not already in it. Then we can really bring economic prosperity to everyone as part of our transition to a clean energy economy.
Thank you. Appreciate that addition. And John, anything lastly to add here to this question?
Sure. I'll just kind of break it down from our perspective. It's basically three things that we want to do, right? We want to recruit, we want to certify, we want to retain a workforce in this new emerging economy. So to do that, we build a roadmap of where those funding opportunities exist, working with offices like SCEP and also with public policy groups like BlueGreen Alliance that can help us align that funding and make sure that we're building, a sustainable roadmap of outreach engagement, bringing more people into the fold and making sure that they're trained and certified on these emerging technologies to build out this economy.
Thank you. And to what I understand, are you saying that unions are actively partnering with these organizations in government agencies and in advocacy organizations? Do you see these partnerships developing?
Absolutely. I think we're at a moment in time right now where that synergy hasn't been more productive, right? We have administration right now that has been pro-union, that isn't afraid to say that because he knows what it actually is, right? It's a training vehicle. It's an apparatus. In our union alone, we have 100 training centers throughout the United States, plus Job Corps, plus other pre-apprenticeship programs that are out there that we're creating these high road training partnerships. So right now, more than ever, I think it's time that people understand that infrastructure is already built to tap into it, to make sure that we're having conversations with those career counselors in every school across the country, and build out a sustainable roadmap.
Excellent. I love to hear that. I'm glad to have representatives from those different entities here today with us on Buildings Hub Live to give us those different perspectives. So I'm excited about this next question. I work here at Atlas. We focus also a lot on electrification of transportation. So I see contractors in clean buildings and energy efficiency the same way I see car dealers for EV adoption, for example. So if a car dealer does not provide prospective buyers with the right information or doesn't have EVs on the lot, or is not knowledgeable about the technology, that prospective car buyer is less likely to purchase an EV or may not be given the right information to make an informed decision about their purchase. So I see contractors playing a similar role, but I'd love to get your perspective. What role do contractors play in terms of customer education for efficiency upgrades and electrification? So let's start with Harley.
I love this question too, Zach. And I think that your framing is exactly right. So one thing at BlueGreen Alliance that we're working on is education for all of the different stakeholders, because depending on the funding source, there might be a different eligible entity, right? So on our website, bluegreenalliance.org, we have a whole resource hub dedicated to bill and IRA funding. And specifically, we have a public buildings roadmap. And that's where you're going to find a lot of our resources as we continue to build that out. We also have a database called buildingclean.org that focuses specifically on domestic manufacturing of a lot of the energy efficient products and building materials. And then also we're rolling out a lot of different webinars. So if you could follow us on LinkedIn or go on our listserv, and people will be able to access those resources and build the awareness so that then the project managers, the contractors will also be able to share that education with who they're trying to connect with.
Excellent. Thank you. And Mary, I'd like to go to you on this question too, because as someone who is going to manage a program, is managing a program to educate and train contractors, what role do they play in that customer education space for our prospective buyers?
Yeah, contractors are really on the front lines of deploying these technologies to homes and businesses and other customers. If a contractor understands an energy efficiency measure or an electrification measure, then they'll know how to promote it and install it and maintain it. There, unfortunately, has been historic distrust among many homeowners for residential contractors, whether because they installed something incorrectly or they heard a cautionary tale from a neighbor. And so I think making sure that the energy efficiency and electrification contractors moving forward really understand these technologies well and also understand the human implications of these technologies will be key. If a contractor knows, for example, what size heat pump a person needs to feel comfortable in their home or to have it at the right level of humidity, then they can really match the customer's needs with the delivery of that new heating or cooling system. So I think informed contractors will really result in happy customers and decarbonized buildings.
Thank you. I'd like to double tap on that as well. thinking about not just about technologies, where to put them, what kind, what size, but also the subsidy opportunities for homeowners and renters, right? What role do you think maybe the government plays in helping contractors learn about the different tax credits available to these buyers, or to the different grant programs that might be coming out of your office?
Great question, Zach. We're still thinking through really how we can make sure the contractors know about all of these new DOE funded programs. And we're encouraging states to think simultaneously about how they're going to train their contractors and which programs they're training those contractors to deliver. So most of the money that I'm here to talk about, the contractor training grants, will flow through state energy offices. And we think that part of the training from states for those contractors should not only be the technical skills, but also should be teaching those contractors about certain incentives they can plug into and help customers access in order to deliver those energy efficiency and electrification measures. So that includes, but is not limited to, promoting the $9 billion in DOE funded home energy rebates. But a lot of states also have incentives at the state and local and utility levels that I would love for these contractors to promote and be familiar with.
Exactly. And I think it would maybe benefit contractors as well, so that customers are more likely to purchase these items that they think it'll be good for their pocketbook. Before we close out the question, I'd like to go over to John. So in your opinion, what role do contractors play in customer education for electrification?
In terms of customer education, our contractors are more on the procurement side, right? So they're looking for work, they're getting work. On that side of it, I think it's more a marketing role for them, where they are, putting out not just to homeowners, but the buildings map at large, talking to a lot of building owners and managers associations, talking to real estate investment trusts, talking to architects and designers as they're building new buildings, to make sure that it's taking advantage of a lot of the tax credits that are out there. In the home space, there is already a cottage industry of contractors that are doing weatherization in this space, like Mary said. The issue is making sure that they're connecting to the state energy programs in a way that they're doing that project right, that they're doing it with job quality drivers that keep people in. One of the reasons for contractors not performing well is turnover in their workforce, right? So people that are working within their working force, that are credentialed to do jobs, that have those job quality drivers like good pay and benefits, is what makes those contractors more palatable to the consumers that are out there, because people are having good experience. They're not passing on bad experience. A lot of this has been word of mouth in the past. Sometimes you see people outside of Home Depot, or you see door hangers that are promoting it. I think in those spaces, we need to promote better experiences. And I think to do that, people need to have the jobs done right, which means, training, certification, retainment of a good workforce.
Thank you. I'd like to stick with you for a new question. It's one of our thornier questions. It's a question I think sort of at the heart of this conversation is, right now, would you say that we have the qualified technicians necessary to decarbonize our buildings at scale? What does our workforce look like right now? And if we don't, what programs and initiatives do you feel would most effectively recruit and train people to do the work we need?
Right. Well, I'd answer that with a question, right?
Okay.
Are we doing this work at scale? Has there been an incentive to do this work on scale? And are people out there? If the answer is no, then there's no workforce out there doing it right now, right? For what's happening at the scale that it's happening right now, you have trained people, but it isn't coordinated in a way where you have less turnover or certifications, things like that. So I think it's really important right now that if we're building the workforce of tomorrow to get into these jobs, that we do have a clear pathway and a clear pipeline with career ladders, with credentials in there, to make sure that you have a workforce that can be retained, right? So we have the apparatus to do that. We can recruit, we can bring in people and train them and certify them pretty much in an accelerated way, because it's already tailored to the trades that we currently perform, like glazing and building envelope work. But we also have funding opportunities that are out there to make sure that we're building up that workforce. We also have new policy in place and guidance that can utilize WIOA funding to advertise for those roles. So making sure that we have the recipe together, that we're using that correct mix, and we're piloting that on local levels to build up the workforce, I think is how we get there.
Excellent. Thank you. I don't know if Harley or Mary wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, I just would double down on what John said, because what John has taught me that the bottom line is, if you can't say, go ahead and start training people if the money's not there yet, right? You have to know that the money is in place so that unions and other, training programs can build up. So I think that's such a key takeaway, is that we need to identify, different sources of workforce development so that all of these really strong programs can ramp up.
And Mary, anything to round us out with?
Nothing to add on that question. Thanks, Zach.
Of course, thank you. So sticking with Mary, don't go away. At the DOE, you manage, as you mentioned, a cornerstone IRA program, or Inflation Reduction Act program, focused specifically on upskilling and workforce training in building decarbonization and electrification. This is a really critical moment. This might be the first time we see such a large program dedicated to this specific target action. Can you tell our audience about what this program is, how it works, where are you in the process, and what we can expect from the DOE office?
So the state-based Home Energy Efficiency Contractor Training Grants is a $200 million program authorized through the Inflation Reduction Act, as Zach said, that will provide funding to all 50 states and the 6 U.S. territories and D.C. The goal of this program is to train residential energy efficiency and electrification contractors. So states and territories can stand up new programs with these funds, or they can invest these dollars in existing training programs focused on the residential sector. So we announced $150 million of this funding in July of 2023, and states are now working on their applications that are due in January of 2024. So right now, DOE is thinking through how we can support states as they put together their applications. We've asked them for a lot in their applications, including a baseline assessment of their residential energy efficiency workforce and where they anticipate gaps in that workforce that they could fill with these training programs. States grants range from about $1 million to $12 million, and we expect those grants will roll out. Once we receive state applications, I hope that we'll issue grants between this fall and next spring, and that training programs will roll out between 2024 and 2027.
And this is a formula program, correct? So every state and territory is entitled to the funding as long as they provide a proposal. Is that correct?
That's correct. For $150 million of the $200 million is formula, and DOE plans to issue another funding announcement for some of the remaining funds through a competitive approach.
Awesome. Great to hear that. Looking forward to seeing as it develops. And guidance came out, right, recently, some form of guidance in July. Is that right? So we can see some of those preliminary guidelines on the program. So I'd like to stick with you because I'm curious, how will you measure success for this program, and what does success look like for you?
Yeah, I think my first definition of success is having enough contractors to deliver the $9 billion in DOE-funded home energy rebate programs. So it's not a requirement that a contractor delivering those rebate-funded technologies have undergone this training, but we are strongly encouraging states to place folks who undergo this training on those DOE-funded rebate projects, because it's an immediate source of work for them, and it also, I think, really addresses both supply of available workers and demand for their services. So it helps workers and homeowners alike. And our ultimate goal is really to have a skilled residential energy efficiency workforce that's ready to meet local demand for energy upgrades.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that ramp up, and in parallel with the Homes and HERA, those home electrification rebate programs. So I'm curious, if you were to talk to state officials right now, how those people currently working on those proposals for the Homes and HERA program, how would you tell them to align or think about aligning your program with that program?
Yeah, so we, the Homes and HERA funding announcement went out earlier this summer, and that was announced on two separate announcements. The first was for administrative funds for states, which I think is around 10% of their total allocation. Mm-hmm. And we're encouraging states to use some of those rebate admin dollars to plan for their workforce development needs. We're for the contractor training grants, we're requiring states to train folks towards certain certifications. Mm-hmm. And so we would encourage states also to require the workers delivering those rebate funded projects to have the certifications that they're pursuing through the contractor training grants. I think it'll also be important for states to train those contractors around how they need to deliver the rebate funded projects. Mm-hmm. You know, there are certain administrative requirements, reporting requirements for DOE that will be really important for contractors to understand and be aware of.
Thank you for getting into the nitty-gritty details with me and nerding out a bit on those small things. I'd like to pivot back to John. This is a high-level question, but also I think a really important one. I wanted to check the pulse with you on the current workforce. So what is the interest level from the contractor community now in doing these decarbonizing retrofit work, or perhaps shifting business focus away from traditional retrofits or projects to new, decarbonized focused projects?
Right. I think that it is high level because it hasn't penetrated yet, right? People are still figuring out guidance. They're still figuring out what even the numbers and acronyms for the programs are that exist in the IRA. So I think at that level, it's starting to penetrate large industry conferences and events, and people are talking about decarbonization opportunities. But remember, when you're talking trades and we're talking contractors, you're talking about one sector of the work. And traditionally, they haven't seen themselves, past the procurement stage, right? Mm-hmm. So when a project comes out, a contractor will do a job that installs glass, whether that's dynamic, whether that's school guard glass, or whatever glass that might be. They look at themselves as a glass installer versus an energy worker. I think we need to get to the point where we are educating the industry and convening in those spaces at those industry events to make sure that they realize that the work that they do is energy work, right? So if they are taking advantage of these tax credits, if they're working within that community of architects, engineers, designers of public facilities, of private facilities and buildings, I think that needs to be elevated to the extent that, say, DOE's Better Buildings Initiative is, right? Mm-hmm. So I think we need to scale those conversations. That needs to happen on the local level in those local contractor association meetings. And I think, again, going back to the synergy between unions, government, and industry right now, I think that's where we have the opportunity to get that message across.
Excellent. I am excited to hear about the trifecta. I think that's a really important point, is making sure that we're aligning all of the efforts from different perspectives to really achieve the common goal that we have here with government money, industry interest, and contractor development, and making sure they have good paying jobs for all. Like to move now to Mary, because we talked about equity and serving underserved communities, making sure all people were involved. This is going to go to Mary, but also to all of our speakers today. But I'd like to start with Mary. How will the DOE or Department of Energy prioritize union labor? We have a union representative here. Diverse business enterprises, those were funded or founded or run by minority communities. How will they be prioritized in program design? And how will we ensure that we reach as many people as possible in your program?
As part of many of the new DOE programs funded through Bill and IRA, we are requiring our grantees to develop community benefit plans. And we're, as part of those community benefit plans, asking grantees to address 4 different components that I think will really make sure that workers and people from disadvantaged communities and labor have a seat at the table in designing and deploying these funds. The first of those pillars is ensuring thorough worker and labor engagement. We're also prioritizing engagement of disadvantaged communities that states will need to identify explicitly in their applications, and also making sure that states are tracking that those services to disadvantaged communities in order to help the government meet our government-wide target of our Justice 40 target, which is to steer 40% of the benefits of these programs to disadvantaged community members. One thing in particular for the contractor training grants that I'm excited about is that we're encouraging and requiring states to not only reach diverse individuals, but to facilitate entrepreneurship among workers from all communities. And so I think both giving people good jobs and helping them own their own businesses will be key for prioritizing and advancing their success.
That's great. That additional entrepreneurial component, that business development component is really important. I wasn't familiar with that. I'd like to go over to Harley on that same question. So you mentioned this topic before, making sure we can recruit and retain women and other racially diverse people. What do you think about this as well?
Yeah, I just wanted to lift up DOE as a really great example because they've been very intentional about these community benefits plans. And we really want to see every agency sort of adopt this within their application process. So BlueGreen Alliance has come up with just like a checklist that you can just make sure you're sort of hitting those main points that Mary talked about so that you're really getting the most benefits out of the infrastructure funding.
Excellent. Thank you for that addition. So believe it or not, we've actually hit our time. It's been 30 minutes. I can't believe it. We had such an incredible conversation. But before we end, we will go into our lightning round, which is a tradition here at Buildings Hub Live, which is exactly as exciting as it sounds. I would like to know in 2 minutes or less from all of our speakers, over the next 5 or 10 years, do you believe we will have the trained labor force necessary to do the work we must to meet our climate goals? And what will that look like? So let's start with Harley.
So my hope is that at every level of government, local, state, federal, that we can attach workforce development funding so that we can make the most out of this sort of once in a generation investment into infrastructure, into buildings. And that will look like high road, high paying, union jobs, and also that represent the diversity of this country, right? It looks like earn and learn apprenticeships. It looks like support services. And all of that is going to increase access into careers into the middle class, right? And especially for, women and Black workers. So if we can do those things, then yes, I believe that we will have the trained labor force necessary to do this work.
Excited to see it happen and excited to see all of you work together to achieve that goal. Over to John.
Of course, Harley, Mary, and I will get that done for you. And really, groups, different community groups coming together with government and labor unions to build up what we already have in place, I think will get us there. I think the more that is helped along through funding to scale and to advertise and promote and get this out to school counselors and anybody that wants a good paying job in these industries, I think that's how we get there. And, we'll be working towards that goal over the next couple of years.
Thank you. I think the idea of getting it into schools, making sure that students are aware of these opportunities for their next stage in life, I think that's really critical. I think about that a lot. And lastly, over to Mary.
I am optimistic that we'll have the workforce needed to decarbonize economy-wide. I think we know what we need to do, and now we just need to do it. A lot of states and cities and unions are already doing this great work, and I hope that this influx of new federal funding can help really build upon those successes and carry them into the future. Because I do have hope for decarbonizing and mitigating climate change while also providing well-paying jobs to individuals across communities.
A lot of wins there for us, and I think we can achieve them if we work together like we are talking about today. I'm excited to have you all on here. But unfortunately, that's all the time we've had today for Buildings Hub Live. I want to say thank you so much to our 3 speakers for joining us, providing their expertise and their insight, and to everyone here in our audience who participated in our discussion today. If you would want to rewatch this episode or share with friends or colleagues, you can find it on the Atlas YouTube page, as well as on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. We encourage you to check out our Buildings Hub platform and to join our electrification community today. Make sure to check out our latest data article on all things heat pump market, and make sure to mark your calendars for October 24th at 1 p.m. for our next episode, where we'll dive deep into the upcoming federal home electrification rebate programs, what we were just talking about today. We hope to catch you all next episode, and have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks all.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Buildings Hub Live. You can listen to this episode and all other installments in our podcast on the Atlas YouTube channel, as well as on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. If you're interested in additional content, check out our data, articles, and dashboards on Buildings Hub at atlasbuildingshub.com. And mark your calendars on October 24th at 1 p.m. Eastern for our next episode, where we'll cover the exciting buzz around the federal home electrification rebate programs. Thanks for joining, and catch you next time.